In Philippians 1, Paul is put into prison, but he counts it as a blessing because it advances the gospel. Not only that, he describes himself as in chains for Christ. And it got me to thinking about some different chains in my life and if those chains are being used to glorify God. And I can honestly answer and say, sometimes no. There's different chains in my life that are self-inflicted chains because of the choices that I've made. And so they seem like small choices in a sense, you know. Here's a small choice. This small choice that seems so insignificant, nothing can come from it. But then what happens is I tend to make another choice. Maybe I told a white lie and I have to cover it up with another lie. But somebody's on to me now and I need to cover up that lie. Well, now I've become in a habit and I've told, a few lies and it becomes a little bit more comfortable to me. And so now I have a habit of making lies, coming up with false narratives and making myself look better. And not only does it become a habit, I've made the choice and now it's become a habit. It becomes a little bit more automatic, a little easier each and every time. See, now I can just start weaving them in. And I don't even know what's going on because it's just so automatic. It becomes so natural. And now I find my identity in all the lies that I've told. And everything going on in my life is just kind of just made up. Now I have this long string of lies and the choices that I've made and the habits that I've formed and the automation of those habits. And now it's my identity. But now it's my nature. Everything about those lies is nothing wrong with it. I don't see the difference between the lie and truth. It started out with just a small choice, but now I'm just in the flow of it all. And what started out so small and insignificant now looks like it's a lot bigger. And so when you get to the point of really stepping back and looking at your situation, or maybe somebody points out, hey, listen, this is a big deal. This is something going on in your life that you need to get checked out. But what can happen is that the enemy can get it to a point where it does become second nature, right? Where it does become your identity and he can start pulling you around. And so all those small choices that you made, the habits that you formed, and how it just became so automatic in your life and it became your identity and now it's your nature. It's so easy to be tempted with all of that stuff. Something happens in your life, something pops up and you need to make an excuse for something or you need to get out of something. The enemy just goes, hey, I got you. You remember that time that you got out of that other thing and remember how good it felt to get past all the guilt and shame of who you actually are from the inside? Remember how you can just lie through that and cover it up and nobody sees the scars, nobody sees the pain underneath, and the enemy just starts tugging at you? Well, Paul said his chains were for Christ. And this is a little bit different of a depiction because now, just like on this side where the enemy can pull you around and guide you in whatever direction that he wants to, jerk you around, what happens now is when you give those chains to Christ and all that suffering and pain that you've experienced, all that brokenness, he changes your identity and your choices start to look a little bit different. Your habits that you form should look a little bit different. And it could bring you to the point of where it becomes automatic in your spiritual walk with Jesus. And now that your identity is in Christ, those natures conflict. And guess what? God is doing a new work in you. He's making something new. You are a new creation. And so that sin nature that you have is no longer the dominant nature in your life. The dominant nature are the chains of Christ. And as we become a servant for Christ, what happens when we start to veer off to sin and we start to think that, hey, I'm gonna go back to what I know. And God's like, nope, I can't let you do that. And I'm like, God, why do you keep convicting me of all this stuff? It's just a small white lie. And he's like, nope, that's not the right thing to do. And as we start to go back to our flesh and to seek different things of the flesh, God keeps pulling us towards Him. And now it becomes a little bit easier when we make those choices. These chains to the world, they get a little bit smaller. As we grow in our relationship with Christ, these chains get smaller. And no longer can we veer off a little bit further. But as we draw closer to Christ, the grip is a lot stronger. And so, the moment you start to veer off, you can feel that tug a lot faster. The closer that you get to God, the shorter these chains to the world get. And now that God is in control of those chains, that tug is a lot less. Or that tug is a lot stronger, I should say. That tug is a lot stronger when you do something wrong. So when you start lying, or when you start changing your identity, or when you start seeking different things, God has already reminded us, hey, look, that's wrong. Your identity's not in your sin. Your identity's not in who you want to be. Your identity's not in the flesh. Your identity is in me. And if I am in you, you should be also in me. And these chains become a grip in our life that can pull us closer to God and to give Him glory, because He uses those chains for His glory. Just like Paul says, I'm going to go to that verse here. Paul, in the end, he did not care what people thought of him. He did not care how God's name was, or the intention behind how God's name was lifted up. He said, as a result, it has become clear throughout the palace guard and to everyone that I am in Christ. But even a little bit further, the former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. And then in verse 18, but what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I will rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice. Because whatever the intention is, God's got a hold of my life. And the gospel is being preached. And it doesn't matter what other people think. I'm going to draw closer and closer. And my chains, even though they still exist, are going to get lighter. They're not going to be as heavy. But I'll tell you what. When God has a grip, I feel it. And those chains remind me of His presence. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day.